Tonight, I'm looking at a war that appears frozen on the surface, but is becoming more dangerous underneath. The Russian-Ukrainian front from Kharkiv to the Dnipro has changed little, yet the fighting remains extremely costly. The most important development is Ukraine's success near Stepnohirsk in the Zaporizhzhia region, where Russian forces have reportedly been pushed out of several settlements. At the same time, Russia is trying to launch counterattacks, raising questions about whether General Teplinsky's Dnipro grouping is facing growing supply problems. I'll also cover the escalating Iran crisis, the near collapse of traffic through the Strait of Hormuz, a massive new Pentagon missile program, and why the spectacular strikes both sides are celebrating may be destroying infrastructure without bringing victory any closer, and the risk of a much larger escalation is growing. On the Russian-Ukrainian front, the overall situation remains largely unchanged. The fighting continues to grind forward across a massive front, stretching from Kharkiv to the Dnipro. Both sides are suffering heavy losses, yet achieving only limited territorial gains. The most significant development is Ukraine's reported success near Stepnohirsk in the Zaporizhzhia region. According to available reports, Ukrainian forces have completely cleared both Primorsk and Plavny of Russian troops. Stepnohirsk itself has also been under Ukrainian control for quite some time. Only a small neighborhood, separated from the rest of the town by open fields and consisting of just a few large apartment buildings, reportedly remains occupied by Russian forces. Everything else has already been recaptured. That represents a meaningful Ukrainian success. What makes this especially interesting is the timing. It comes while General Mikhail Teplinsky has been attempting to launch a counteroffensive. Russia's Dnipro grouping has received reinforcements and has now made two separate attempts to halt Ukraine's advance by launching offensives of its own. The first effort focused on Stepnohirsk. Then, just yesterday, reports emerged claiming Russian forces were trying to break through Ukrainian defensive lines to reach the outskirts of Orikhiv. At the same time, the Vostok group was reportedly attacking toward Orikhiv from another direction. And today, almost immediately afterward, new reports appeared describing additional Ukrainian gains. Taken together, that paints a very interesting picture. I believe the Russian forces operating in the Dnipro sector may be experiencing growing logistical problems, despite the constant stream of Russian reports claiming major successes by the Rubicon drone unit against the Magyar birds, including strikes on drone launch sites, the elimination of drone operators, successful interceptions of Ukrainian drones, and claims that pressure on the Novorossiysk supply corridor has been significantly reduced. The broader picture suggests those claims may not tell the whole story. At the same time, we can also see Ukrainian drones striking targets across the Sea of Azov and even operating beyond the Crimean Bridge into the Black Sea. We've seen tankers catch fire. No, they aren't sinking. These drones are too small to send massive tankers to the bottom. But starting a fire is another matter entirely. And a fire aboard an oil tanker is a serious problem by any standard. Looking at the damage inflicted on shipping in the Sea of Azov, one conclusion becomes difficult to ignore. Anyone can claim success. The real challenge is preventing those drones from reaching their targets. So far, Russia has not managed to do that. Reports also continue to arrive almost daily about Ukrainian strikes against Sevastopol in Crimea. That's why I'm not ready to declare the Rubicon unit the winner of this aerial campaign over the Novorossiysk supply corridor. I remain highly skeptical of those claims. And if those drone attacks continue, they cannot help but affect the logistics of General Teplinsky's Dnipro grouping. That's exactly what we appear to be seeing. Ukraine has maintained offensive pressure near Zaporizhzhia for quite some time. Meanwhile, Teplinsky has tried repeatedly to organize an effective response. He has capable units. He has a reputation as a competent commander. Yet things simply aren't coming together for him. Only yesterday, Russian media celebrated reports of an offensive toward Orikhiv. The headlines sounded triumphant. Then today came what amounts to a cold shower. Reports emerged describing the complete loss of both Primorsk and Plavny. As usual, Russian official sources refused to acknowledge those setbacks. To be fair, Ukraine often behaves the same way when the situation is reversed. But here's what caught my attention. A military channel closely associated with Russia's Ministry of Defense, one known for taking a strongly nationalist and pro-government position, has effectively acknowledged these developments. That leads me to believe Ukrainian forces have indeed pushed Russian troops back significantly in the Stepnohirsk sector. On the other sectors of the front, there have been no major changes. The war continues to settle into what appears, from the outside, to be a slow-moving conflict. In reality, it remains an extremely intense, costly, and exhausting positional war. Russian forces continue their operations near Kostiantynivka, as well as around Kramatorsk and Sloviansk. They have entered the phase of consolidation. Assault units that managed to push deep into Ukrainian defenses now require follow-on forces to secure those gains. Those reinforcing units must clear the remaining Ukrainian defensive positions, eliminate isolated pockets of resistance, and establish control before the assault groups can continue moving forward. As a result, there are often no reports of new territorial advances. Even so, occasional claims still appear suggesting Russian troops are only a few kilometers from Kramatorsk or have advanced somewhere else along the line. Meanwhile, Bieletsky and Ukraine's Third Corps continue fighting on the eastern bank of the Siversky Donets River. Despite repeated Russian efforts, the expected breakthrough simply hasn't materialized. Kostiantynivka has already been declared practically captured more than once. According to some reports, everything there is supposedly going according to plan. But it's worth remembering that Russian forces have been attacking both Kostiantynivka and Lyman at the same time. Lyman, however, still hasn't fallen. One of the key reasons is the continued resistance of the Azov Brigade, which has prevented that outcome. This is exactly what a stubborn, grinding, and bloody positional war looks like. Quick victories are extremely difficult to achieve. For me, one conclusion stands out. The longer this war continues, the lower Russia's chances of successfully completing its 2026 campaign. That reality may also increase pressure on Moscow's leadership to consider more radical forms of escalation. From a military standpoint, that primarily means the possibility of another large-scale mobilization inside Russia. We'll have to see whether the Kremlin is prepared to take that step. Based on the pace of Russian operations today, I have serious doubts that, even under favorable conditions, they can achieve what they describe as the complete liberation of Donbass before the end of this year. Kostiantynivka alone required months of preparation. Kramatorsk is an even larger and more difficult objective. With only a few months remaining, it's hard to see how such ambitions could realistically be achieved. The conflict involving Iran continues to escalate. Iran has launched missile strikes against Bahrain's national oil company. Meanwhile, according to Israeli sources that closely monitor developments across the Middle East, the United States has destroyed several strategically important bridges. Reports claim that 7 bridges and railway facilities have been hit. The shift from purely military targets toward attacks on energy infrastructure by Iran, along with strikes affecting civilian infrastructure by the United States, is a clear indication that this conflict is entering a more dangerous phase. In my view, the level of escalation is likely to continue increasing. Iranian officials are making increasingly aggressive statements, promising to drive their regional adversaries back into the desert. President Trump, for his part, has threatened to bomb Iran into what he describes as the Stone Age. Neither objective is realistically achievable. What both sides can do, however, is inflict enormous damage on one another. In that sense, this conflict is beginning to resemble the war between Russia and Ukraine. The cycle is becoming increasingly familiar. One side strikes critical infrastructure. The other responds with even larger attacks. Russia targets Odessa and Ukraine's port facilities. Ukraine retaliates by striking Russian cities and military targets deep inside Russian territory, including facilities near angles. The images are dramatic. Commentators enthusiastically calculate the damage inflicted on the opposing side. But none of these escalating strikes answer the fundamental question. They do not bring victory any closer. Instead, they simply increase the scale of destruction while deepening the hostility between both sides. The United States could destroy 77 bridges inside Iran if it wanted to. That still would not reopen the Strait of Hormuz. Bombing infrastructure is one thing. Reopening one of the world's most strategically important waterways is something entirely different. That would require a major amphibious military operation. And J.D. Vance has already made America's position clear. The United States is not going to send ground troops. From Washington's perspective, much of this escalation appears designed for political messaging. The message is simple. Look how tough President Trump is on Iran. The problem is that many American voters simply are not interested in another war in the Middle East.